Sykes is a Philippines analyst. He's joining us from Portsmouth here in the United Kingdom. What are you hearing about these opinion polls? Are we going to get another Marcos, do you think?
It's looking like it, isn't it? Yes, a friend of mine who's a journalist in Manila on the ground has just texted me to say that basically don't expect any surprises. The recent opinion polls I saw put him at 56%, which would mean that that would be a kind of landslide comparatively. The nearest contender is Robledo on 23%, so it is looking like a win for Marcos.
And what kind of leader will he make?
Well, I mean, he's already tarnished by his connection to his family. You know, of course, his father Ferdinand led this appalling kind of autocratic regime from the 60s to the 80s. Many thousands were killed and disappeared and persecuted. Bongbong, in addition to that, is very close to the current President Duterte, who has to step down today, and is very much associated with supporting his drug war, which is really just a campaign of extrajudicial killings against not only drug pushers, but drug users, but also political adversaries, trades unionists, indigenous rights activists. So it's been a very dark chapter of Philippine history recently, and it seems that there may be another dark chapter following if Bongbong becomes president.
An extraordinary in those circumstances that the population, the electorate, want more of the same.
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation around, especially aimed at Lenny Robledo, who's obviously the sort of favourite of the more liberal-minded sections of the electorate. And the Marcoses have become very adept at sort of manipulating social media and other forms of communications in order to really just kind of libel and slander Robledo. I mean, I would say there are deeper reasons for this sort of disaffection that keeps, and this is a global problem, you could argue, that the sort of failures of what we might call kind of the neoliberal settlement around the world. The Philippines, over the last 30 years, has deregulated and privatized lots of industries. There've been attacks on workers' rights, and people like Robledo are seen as being part of that sort of neoliberal elite. And there's lots of persuasive analysis that suggests that that kind of, the neoliberal consensus caused a lot of disaffection and a lot of alienation that drove people into the arms of demagogues like Duterte and now, Marcos Jr.
And any idea then that we're going to get some kind of revisionist history or wrongdoing exposed is for the birds now, isn't it? I mean, there's actually a campaign pledge that any kind of investigation into what happened in the past is just going to be whitewashed away from history.
Unfortunately, it looks like that. I mean, it's the same anywhere, isn't it? That the rich and powerful always seem to get away with this, and people who control the money and the resources also control the means of communication and the means of sort of frame the debate in this way. I mean, it's worth pointing to a very strong resistance movement that has been growing throughout the Duterte era. The Robledo campaign, for all the kind of faults potentially, in terms of her sort of closeness to that particular element of the Philippine elite, has been a very kind of encouraging coalition of young and old and different types of activists, intellectuals, but also working class grassroots sort of activists. There's another ticket which I think is worth looking at. They have no chance, unfortunately, because it's like other political systems around the world, money and violence and patronage dominate the Philippine political system. But the ticket of Leody de Guzman and Walden Bello, and Bello is, is vice president, de Guzman is standing for president, are standing on what you might call a sort of democratic socialist ticket. They want higher taxes for the wealthy. They want better workers' rights. They want an end to corruption and dynastic politics. And while they don't have a hope in hell of winning, they do represent, I think, a groundswell of anger and opposition towards exactly the sort of whitewashing and revisionist history, sort of historical revisionism that, you rightly say, the Marcoses have been indulging in for 40 years now, and that's, unfortunately, will continue under a Bongbong administration.
Tom Sykes, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.